start again. It's a Redskins.
What's going on, everybody? It's the Bulls Show, aka Aidan, and welcome back to another video. Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a lot of rumors and a lot of interest around a couple of players in terms of that center position that was announced, I guess, last night for the Chicago Bulls, that we've had interest in some of these players. And continuing on the trade prospects and the free agency prospects for the Chicago Bulls, today I want to talk about one of those players in Rudy Gobert. Now, I'll bring you the news first. The Chicago Bulls are interested in a player like Rudy Gobert and Mitchell Robinson. So we will make a Mitchell Robinson video down the line. But for now, I'm going to be talking about the star player here, ladies and gentlemen. A player that is very well defined and I think a lot of people would really like on this Chicago Bulls team. I want to talk about those positives and those negatives and what I think the Bulls need to do to make this work if Rudy Gobert was to come to the Chicago Bulls. But before we get started, please like and subscribe to the Bulls Show. Turn notifications on and let me know in the comments below your thoughts about Rudy Gobert's potential at the Chicago Bulls. Do you think this makes us a much better team? Do you think that there's little to no difference made by bringing Rudy Gobert into the Chicago Bulls team? And what do you think needs to happen around Rudy Gobert and the players on this team in order for this to be a successful, I guess, bringing in for the Chicago Bulls? Because I do feel like there are a couple of things that needs to be done to make a trade like this, if we are to do it, very successful. But let's talk about his stats first, ladies and gentlemen. Played 66 games for the Utah Jazz this season. The points tally is 15.6 points per game, 14.7 rebounds per game, 1.1 assists per game, shooting 71.3% from the field. And we all know Rudy Gobert is not a three-point shooter, so he didn't take, I don't believe, a three, and he didn't make a three either this season. But again, I could be wrong on that. I'm not actually sure. But I think we all know what Rudy Gobert is, ladies and gentlemen. He's a defensive juggernaut, in my opinion. He's one of the best defenders in the NBA today, one of the best rim protectors in the NBA today, and he holds his own against a lot of the smaller guards as well. Now, at the end of the day, he's not someone that I would say we need to put in this team to be able to switch onto guards or anything like that. But holding your own is very important in this league, and I think Rudy Gobert can do that at some extent. Also, just looking at his blocks per game this season, he averages 2.1 blocks, and he also averages 0.7 steals. But he's definitely, I guess, a presence in that paint. A lot of people have to second guess coming into that paint when Rudy Gobert is there. Even when he's not necessarily blocking the shots that he should be blocking, he's definitely someone that can deter shots as well. He's a much better defensive player than the players we have already on this team, especially in that center position, in a guy like a Nikola Vucevic, even the guys off the bench like a Tony Bradley. Rudy Gobert is much better in that way. He does have a little bit of a presence in the paint in terms of scoring-wise, 15.6 points per game. Most of that comes from the paint. He can shoot free throws as well, which is very, very important. Shot 69% from the free throw line this season. So that's obviously an improvement over what we had with Tristan Thompson, and that would be an improvement. But I think Vucevic is obviously the better three-point shooter. I think Vucevic is obviously the better offensive player. Now, why is this happening? Why are the Chicago Bulls linked to Rudy Gobert? Because I can talk about stats all night long, but at the end of the day, it's a very interesting story as to why we show interest in Rudy Gobert and why I feel like a lot of the things around the Jazz right now is very confusing in my opinion. So this comes based off of the Jazz obviously getting eliminated very early in the NBA playoffs. A lot of people saw that as embarrassing. The mainstream media called out the Utah Jazz for always screwing up or always letting people down that had the faith in them, stuff like that. Again, I feel like the mainstream media always goes over the top in terms of these circumstances and stuff like that. But that's what they do. They've done that with the Bulls. They've obviously done that with the Jazz here as well. Because I think the team that they lost to ended up going to the Western Conference Finals. So at the end of the day, you can hate on the Jazz all you want. They lost to a good team in all honesty, and as much as they have their ambitions, they were last season first in the Western Conference. They obviously have ambitions to go and win championships and at least go and make it more competitive. And it is kind of embarrassing going out in the first round, but the opposition that they were facing was no easy feat either. You have to be honest in that retrospect also. But yeah, and also the story about their head coach leaving after, I believe, 8 years of service with the Utah Jazz. In my opinion, one of the better coaches in the NBA, and someone that I feel like whichever team gets Quin Snyder from the Utah Jazz will be a very, very lucky team, and hopefully he can help transform that team. Maybe it's the Bulls down the line, who really knows? But for now, I'm going to have to say it's probably not going to be the Chicago Bulls. But there's a lot of stories around Utah, and I don't think it's, I guess, a coincidence that through all the stories that the Utah Jazz are going through right now, through all of the circumstances, a lot of people saying that they should blow up Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert and rebuild entirely. A lot of people wanting them to stay together, but there's clearly conflict there from the media, and I guess even Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, they don't necessarily say there's a lot of conflict or any conflict whatsoever, but the media is pushing that narrative. So maybe there is something there, maybe there isn't something there, but there's just a lot of stories about the Utah Jazz, and there are a lot of stories about Rudy Gobert. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we're all of a sudden interested in Rudy Gobert when all of these things are happening. So can this happen? Yes. At the end of the day, if the stories are true and the Utah Jazz want to rebuild, there could be potential that we trade our first-round pick. Obviously, we have to match the salary because he's on a massive salary, ladies and gentlemen. He's not a free agent until 2026. He'll be 34 years old. He's going to be making more money as time goes by. By the end of his, contract, he'll be making $46 million. If for the Utah Jazz, for the Chicago Bulls, whichever team wants to trade for him, he's making a lot of money, ladies and gentlemen. He'll be 33 by the time that contract expires. So you're going to be having Rudy Gobert for the long haul. It's not a Vucevic expiring deal. It's not a Kobe White restricted free agency. We'll talk about those two later. If you bring in Rudy Gobert, you're going to bring him in mostly for the long haul. And it might be difficult to trade him, but at the end of the day, that's definitely something you have to consider. I also believe there's a player option in one of those years also. It can happen, definitely, especially if it's pretty much up to the Utah Jazz. If they think a rebuild is necessary, they'll be listening to offers about Rudy Gobert. I don't think they'll be listening to offers about Donovan Mitchell. I think that narrative at the end of the day was driven because Zach LaVine's a free agent and maybe a like-for-like could happen. But I don't see Donovan Mitchell leaving Utah. I see Rudy Gobert being the one that actually leaves the Utah Jazz. It can definitely happen. Can the Chicago Bulls make a trade? I think they can. Obviously, there will be other teams out there that might be listening and maybe can offer better deals. What can the Chicago Bulls offer? In order to match Rudy Gobert's salary, I believe we have to trade Nikola Vucevic and Kobe White. And I also think you could probably throw in another player there as well. Draft compensation would have to be a necessity if they're going for a rebuild also. So maybe the 18th overall pick that we have would go to the Utah Jazz. That would have to happen after we make a selection. So we can select whatever they, I guess, want from that 18th overall pick. You can also look in a different direction in terms of the future first round picks or second round picks that we have. We do not have that many, but at the same time, we might not need that much if you're going to also give up Vucevic and Kobe White. I think that's more than enough for Utah to actually accept that deal because Vucevic is a very good offensive center and he does limit the damage that would be had when it comes to losing Rudy Gobert. Because Rudy Gobert is going to be a very impactful player. Obviously, he is for the Utah Jazz. But at the same time, Vucevic is still a very good center in this league as well. He's a little bit on the older side. He's older than Rudy Gobert. Many teams or many people say he's on a decline if you're a Chicago Bulls fan. But a team like the Utah Jazz, maybe if they're looking for a retool, I think Nikola Vucevic is a very good option for them. And they'd also be getting Kobe White, who could be a fantastic scoring option off of the bench for them. But at the same time, we all know Kobe White's not consistent, but could be very valuable for the Utah Jazz if they could find a way to make him consistent like they've done with Jordan Clarkson and now how he's become a fantastic bench player for them. So in order, I guess, to sum this up, it can happen. It's pretty much up to Utah. I think we can offer a good deal to Utah, and I definitely think it's not out of the question for Rudy Gobert to leave and for us to retain him. It would have to match salaries as well. How would this work for the Chicago Bulls? Can we make this work? Because in my opinion, if you leave the team exactly the same and you just trade Kobe White and Nikola Vucevic for Rudy Gobert with whatever picks go along, that's not going to be good enough for the Chicago Bulls. I'm going to say that now. There are a lot of people that are arguing that Rudy Gobert will clog up the paint for DeMar DeRozan and will clog up the paint for Zach LaVine because he's not necessarily a floor spreader. I personally think that's an issue, but that's not a big issue in my eyes if we can get more three-point shooting around the Chicago Bulls team for the future. I feel like that's also why the Bulls are looking at a lot of undrafted prospects that have good shooting percentages from the three-point line, because we just need shooting even without Rudy Gobert on this team. We need more three-point shooting. But in order to make that work with DeMar DeRozan and Rudy Gobert, You got to add more shooting on this team. Lonzo's a good shooter. Zach LaVine could be a good shooter, but sometimes he takes some very bad shots from the three-point line. Obviously, you're hoping that Patrick Williams can develop into a more prolific three-point shooter. Same with Io. But all in all, our three-point shooting was probably one of our weakest parts of our season, especially towards the end. There was a time when we had the highest percentage with the lowest attempts, but once Lonzo Ball left that team, was injured, we became a very, very bad three-point shooting team, and it showed in every single way. Rudy Gobert doesn't help that whatsoever, and he also kind of damages DeMar DeRozan's game. But all of a sudden, if you add three-point shooters in the corners, that will make them at a high efficiency, and you also add players that could get catch and shoots, or not afraid to take them and make them with a high efficiency. You have a team like what the Dallas Mavericks are, for example. A team that is spread the floor, all three-point shooters. You leave one of them open, they'll most likely make you pay from the three-point line. If you add that sort of three-point caliber shooting into your team, or even like the Warriors, whatever the case may be, you're going to have a much better duo between Rudy Gobert and DeMar DeRozan, and from Zach LaVine and Lonzo, whoever's on this team as well. Because I don't think it's a deal breaker to have DeMar and Rudy Gobert on the same team. In fact, I actually think they're the type of duo that could help each other from the pick and roll. Rudy Gobert is the type of guy where people complain that no one passes him the ball in the paint. I feel like DeMar DeRozan can help him in that retrospect. I feel like DeMar DeRozan can make him a better offensive player. But at the same time, if you don't have three-point shooters out there, then the paint's going to get clogged. Regardless of what you think, there are going to be people that are going to be guarding that and zoning DeMar DeRozan from the mid-range, and there are going to be people clogging up the paint because our three-point shooting is lacking. So those two will definitely be hindrances. But the way for me to see this work, I need three-point shooters on this team. Constant three-point shooters. Everybody outside of DeMar and Rudy Gobert, has to be able to shoot the ball. That includes LaVine, that includes Lonzo, that includes our bench players. If all of them are good three-point shooters and we can make that partnership work, then this team will get much better out of Rudy Gobert because his defensive presence is much more impactful for this team. And I think we'll see a lot better in terms of the defensive end for the Chicago Bulls. But if we don't get floor spreaders, if we don't get players that can knock down the three with high efficiency, then I think we're going to see a relatively the same, if not a worse Chicago Bulls team, especially on the offensive end. So we got to have that fine line. But I would definitely love Rudy Gobert on this team. But the question is, what can we do around Rudy Gobert? It's not just about Rudy Gobert. It's about what we do around them. And that's where I trust AK completely with what they're doing right now, looking at second-round talents, looking at undrafted prospects, trying to find shooters that we could potentially bring into this team. That's why I trust them completely. But we just got to do something about that three-point line. That's personally what I believe. If I'm wrong, you tell me I'm wrong. If I'm right, you can agree and explain why I'm right and stuff like that. It doesn't really matter to me, but that's personally what I see in relation to Rudy Gobert. If we just do this trade for the sake of doing this trade without doing anything else, we will suffer, in my opinion. But if you make a team designed around DeMar DeRozan and designed around Rudy Gobert to cover their flaws and implore them to use their strengths defensively, in the paint, mid-range, then we're going to see better. But we need a team that can do that. So we'll have to wait and see what AK and the front office can do in that retrospect. But I'm going to end this video here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you're new. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Rudy Gobert, what could potentially happen in this type of situation. And a lot of people have talked about Rudy Gobert to the Bulls before. And I think in terms of being realistic, it's probably just as realistic now. It's more realistic now than I think it's ever been because there's so much stories about it. But I gotta say, if you're a Utah Jazz fan watching this, I still believe Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert will be on the same team next season. I 100% believe that because I think the whole point of getting rid of their coach is to try something new before they go for a complete rebuild. I feel like if they're going for a complete rebuild, they may as well. I guess it can go both ways because if Quin Snyder heard they're going for a rebuild, he could have just left to take a year off and go to a competitive team again. But also, I feel like it was so sudden that he left that I do feel like they probably would have kept him to help a rebuild because he's a great coach in my opinion. But at the same time, I don't know. Maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about. But I do think Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell will most likely be on the same team. If it comes to the Bulls, that's great. Let's see how it works in relation to that. Take care and peace.